Hey there, it's Mark Blasco, and today I wanted to talk a little bit about what I can offer as a producer in my studio. Now, when you're new to recording, you may not realize that there is a difference between someone who will record for you and someone who will produce your music. A recording engineer's job is to make sure the mics work, that all the parts come out cleanly, and in the end, that the mix sounds good, and that's important. But there's a lot more to making a song sound great. So, for right now, I'm going to talk about my process working with a songwriter who doesn't have a band, because when you have a band involved, the process is a little different. I'll talk about that another time. First, let's talk about the vibe of the session and the overall experience. My goal, aside from having you leave here with a recording you're really happy with, is to make sure the whole experience is fun, because if you're having a good time, it really does come through on the recording. I know the first couple of times you go into a studio and record, it can be a little nerve wracking, but I try to keep things as relaxed as possible. A lot of people I work with are just songwriters who have a song or maybe an album's worth of songs, but all we need is a song. The first step is to record what I call the scratch recording. This is just playing the song once through, usually singing along with guitar or piano. At this point, we're not concerned with how good anything sounds. It's just a chance for me to hear the song and to start thinking about how to build up a production around it. We record the first pass so we can go back and listen to specific parts and we can talk about things like tempo, feel, instrumentation, stuff like that. From there, we start to build up a map of the song. We'll plan out the chord changes, how long the chorus and verses are, how fast everything's going to go, and everything we need before we can start recording the different parts. From this point on, we start working on the feel, which helps to choose the instrumentation. So a slower song is going to have different needs than a fast song, different drum sounds, different types of guitars, if any, different keyboards, that kind of stuff. We start building stuff up, usually drums first because they have such a big impact on the feel and vibe of the song, but not always. Sometimes there's something else that's kind of pushing things forward. So we may start somewhere else. But the goal here is going to build the foundation of the song. For a rock song, that's usually drums, bass, and guitar, maybe keys. For a pop song, that might be drum machine and synths. But whatever the style, we're just looking for the core instruments that make up most of the sound of the song. And don't worry if you can't play all those instruments or even any of them. I've got a bunch of different instruments in my studio, and I'm comfortable playing guitar, bass, drums, keyboard, saxophone, and percussion. I've also got a ton of software on my computer with samples of amazing instruments recorded in high end studios. So we can create string orchestras, percussion from around the world, brass and horns, all sorts of different piano and keyboard sounds, drum sounds, synthesizers, you name it. At this point, we'll record the vocals. And depending on the singer, we can do this in a number of different ways, but I've found that what usually works best is to record the full song 3 or 4 times. And then if there are parts that could be a little better, we'll go back and re record those sections a few more times. Once that's done, I'll do what's called a vocal comp, where we take the best performance for each part of the song and edit them together into one seamless take. At this stage, we'll have a pretty good recording of the song, and we could stop there, but there'll usually be little bits we can add to help bring it up to the next level. So, this may be some extra guitars in the background, harmony vocals, percussion like shakers or tambourine, some keyboard layers, sound effects, you name it. There's almost always room for some of these little bits to kind of sprinkle in some magical moments in the song. And these are the things that don't always stand out, but when you take them out, the song kind of loses some of its impact. So now that we have everything recorded, it's time to mix the song. Now, in my studio, I like to build up a rough mix as we're going, so the process usually doesn't take a very long time. but it is an important step. This is where you work on the volumes, tones, and effects of everything to get it all sounding great. And there's two levels of mixing. First, there's a static mix and then a dynamic mix. A static mix is where we get all the volumes sounding good for each instrument and then just kind of leave them there for the song, which for some songs works great. But we can take it to the next level with a more dynamic mix, which means we hone in on the volumes and effects throughout the song, changing them to highlight important parts. So this could mean bringing up the drums for 2 seconds during a drum fill, or bringing out the harmonies for certain words, adding in a delay on the vocals just at the ends of the chorus, stuff like that. Little details that help to add a little bit of energy and excitement to the mix. Once the mix is done, the last step is mastering. And on bigger budget productions, this will be done by a separate mastering engineer, but we can do it here as well. Mastering involves a couple of different things. It's a final chance to add in some subtle tonal shaping to the overall mix, but that's not always needed. This is also where we're going to get the overall level loud enough so that when you play it back to back with another commercial recording, they'll both be at the same volume. And lastly, this is where we make sure the file is in the correct format for what you want to do with it. So if you want MP3s, or you want to put it on a CD, or you want to file for streaming, those all need different file formats and settings. And that's it. That's the process. From start to finish, it's usually around 6 to 10 hours per song, but that can vary a lot. If someone comes in here really prepared and can play their instrument and sing their song well, and we don't need to do a lot of editing, or if the song doesn't have a complex production, things can go much quicker. Or if the goal is not to have a fully produced recording, but to keep it simpler, that can speed things up. On the other hand, if the song still needs some work with the lyrics, or if we have to spend a lot of time figuring out the vibe, or if someone really isn't prepared and ready to sing it, then things can take a lot longer, and there's no real way to know for sure. In general, what I like to say is that you should expect to spend 1 day per song for the production and recording, and then we'll come back to it on a different day with fresh ears for a couple hours to do the final mix and mastering. We can do it all in 1 day if we need to, and certainly I can come back to it after a couple days for some tweaks that need to be made. But it's really easy to lose perspective when you've been working on a song all day, and then sometimes when you listen to it later on, you'll notice things you didn't notice in the studio. And that's why I like to do the final mix and master on a different day than the recording. Hopefully this answers any questions you might have before coming in to record in my studio. But if there's something I didn't cover, feel free to email me, studio@markblasco.com, or put your questions in the comments in this video, and I'll make sure to get you an answer. Thanks.